This conference will now be recorded.
All right, hello everyone. Brian Gockel here, Weather Service Office of Observations, welcoming you to the weekly Satellite Book Club seminar series. Our seminar today will be given by presenter Kari Sheets. Kari is with our Office of Dissemination, and she's going to be presenting a talk entitled Weather Service National GIS Map Viewer. Our facilitator today is Brian Mata from the Forecast Decision Training Division. And before we begin, just a few of the usual preliminary announcements. As you heard, the session's being recorded, available for folks who want to come back and listen later, and you're welcome to share this with others. Q&A, as usual, will be at the end. We ask you to post your questions in the chat room, and the TOWS team here will be collecting the questions for the facilitator and the presenter to go over at the end. And we especially encourage questions from you field users. But everyone is welcome to post questions. We encourage you always to sign in with your full names so that we can track where the questions are coming from, and so we can follow up with you. Most of you are already doing that. Thank you very much. But if you're not already doing that, please try to sign in with your full names. And we've got some talks already lined up for July, but we're always looking further out in the future for presenters. So if you're interested in presenting, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact the TOWS team. And the training group, Brian Mata, can help develop training materials to show you that which training materials that already exist and develop maybe more that might be needed for your talk, or at least advise on how that might be done. Thank yous go to the TOWS team for their preparations related to this, in particular Kashad Bowman, who gets us all lined up here in advance of these meetings. Thanks to the OCLO for all the training collaboration, and appreciate having Brian here today. Thanks to the GOZAR JPSS program offices, to our facilitators, presenters, and thanks to all of you, our participants. So in just a second, we're going to pass the mic over to Kari and ask her to begin. But before we do, wanted to give a little bit of a background on Kari. She's worked for NOAA for 20 years, mostly in GIS, Geographical Information Systems, for the Weather Service. She holds a BS degree in Atmospheric Science from the University of Louisiana at Monroe, and a Master of Engineering in Geographic Systems from the University of Colorado at Denver. Kari's currently with our Office of Dissemination. She's the GIS team lead there and the GIS Viewer project manager. On a personal note, I had the pleasure of working with Kari in the Office of Dissemination when the IDP was being stood up, and she was the GIS lead for a number of services that ended up being hosted there and elsewhere. It was a pleasure working with you, Kari, and we're really pleased to have both you as an individual as well as a representative from the Office of Dissemination, who we don't have regularly here at this meeting, so glad to have an Office of Dissemination GIS expert here. Kari, welcome to the Satellite Book Club, and please begin when you're ready.
Thanks, Brian. So yes, this is what we're looking at on the screen now is the Weather Services National GIS Map Viewer. Some of you, it may be familiar to you if you've worked with NOS very much. The NOS Office of Response and Restoration developed an application called ERMA, the Environmental Response Management Application. And this general information screen that's up here tells you all about that. And we have a service level agreement to share code with them. So the viewer, which is what we call this application for short, was developed on top of the ERMA code base. So one of the things that we have that's a little bit unique from the NOS application is that we have decided to make our unique sites within, like subsites of the viewer, program-based, are basically types of weather categories. So the general, which is what you're looking at here, has the Weather Ready Nation branding on it. We talked with our teams that we call our public team and our impact decision support services team about what should just general interest for a weather service web interactive web map look like. And so the general consensus was pretty much the same thing as weather.gov, which is our hazards displayed. So that's what you see here. But we also have tailored sites for tropical and water. Those are the first two we worked on based on funding. So they're more built out than the others. So I just clicked on the water and it has taken us there. Again, you'll see the information tab every time you visit any of the sites, but you can see the view changed a little bit when I clicked on water. So we worked with our water experts and they came up with these layers as the primary layers that they wanted to have displayed when you would go to the viewer. So it's the river stages, if they're near flooding or at flooding, flood-related watches, warnings, advisory statements, and outlooks, and then the quantitative precipitation estimate. So that's what looks like a radar, but it's actually a QPE layer that is on here. So the defaults are always to the legends, so you know what you're looking at. But if you wanted to interact with the layers, you click on the Layer tab, and then you get access to the full database of layers for the water site. For all of the sites combined, we have almost 2,000 layers now. I think we may have actually crossed over 2,000 earlier today with some addition of data that's actually won't be visible to everyone until July 5th, but we have some additional flood inundation models coming that will be going public on July 5th. So I don't think it's going to, normally when you click here, you see recent data in the last 30 days, but it's only data that is what we call public. So it's been since June 2nd that we added public data. But if you come to the site on July 6th, you should see that 56 more layers will be added. So I know you are the satellite group. So we do have a few satellite data sets in here. If we're requested to add additional, if they're in a GIS format, we can get those added usually within a day or two. So I'm going to clear the layers that are currently on here, and then I will turn on the GOES layers. And so once I clicked on the GOES layer, you'll notice two things appeared. Well, one thing appeared, and then we'll be able to activate this clock here. So the opacity slider allows you to do exactly what it sounds like, adjust the opacity, making things darker or lighter. So this makes it a little bit easier when you're layering data. So the first data layer that you click will be your bottom data layer, and then as you add on, it draws the additional data layers on top. And so I'm going to make the opacity lighter for each of these. Now, the clocks let you know that there's a time component to the data. And so the data, if you click on the clock, it adds the data layer to what we call the time slider. And then there's a gear icon right here that'll allow you to adjust settings. So the time extent, when it says all layers, it expands it so that it covers all of the times available. If you wanted to manually select, then you could choose what time period you want to look at the data through. You can also slow down or speed up how quickly it will advance through time. And then finally, you hit the play button and it works through the data. So you can see a little bit of movement there. I'll slow it down a little bit so it's not jumping quite as much. And you can also pause and then use the reverse and forward buttons like you see on many NOAA websites. So this folder here is pretty much what we have as far as imagery is concerned. Other things that might also be of interest, not necessarily satellite data, but data that is either derived from satellites. We have ocean heat. So this is what we call our search bar. And as long as this box is not checked, it's a keyword search. I know there is a heat content layer. So, well, here's the RTMA from NCEP. That's another data set that's pretty popular. Again, it has time. Every data layer has the opacity slider available once you turn the layer on. Because I'm from Weather Service, near real-time weather observations, this one is also interesting because as you zoom in, more data becomes visible. And this is preset by the data provider as to which data comes into play. So I'm using the plus and minus here to zoom in and out. This area here is called the map navigation tools. And so you can also slide up to zoom in and down to zoom out. And then my favorite tool is the click and drag to zoom. So we'll just go to the middle, middle of the country by drawing a box. And you can go in all the way to the street level. If there's not an observation site there, you're not going to see the data. If I wanted to step back, then we have a previous extent. And so you can keep going back to the different areas that you have zoomed in on previously. And once you've gone back, you can also go forward. So this was grayed out before for the next extent, but now it's kind of a light blue color. And once you've stepped forward through everything that's in the memory, it will gray out. And when you hover over it, you get a do not enter sign. Other things you can do, and I know this, we've only got a few more minutes left for the presentation, but this is what we call the measurement tool, and you can measure distance or area, and you just single click and then double click to finish. And so that line I drew is 34.38 miles. If I drew an area, it would print the area in the middle. And you can also change, when you activate the tool, you can choose the units you would like to operate in. Another fun weather service perspective is that we have point weather forecasts. So if you activate this lightning bolt tool and then click on a point on the map, it will open the Weather Forecast Office's web page for that location. And then you can close that. The one thing that I will say that this button here, it's a globe with a little kind of hat icon on it. So that's my location. When you click on this, if you have VPN on, sometimes it goes to the location of your VPN. I do have VPN on today, but I'm sitting on Long Island, and it actually is pretty close to my location, my actual location. So, but I'm not sitting in the Great South Bay. I'm very close to it. So that's one, and the VPNs just interact with it interestingly. This tool here is one we developed based on a weather service request, and that's the proximity tool. So you can create a buffer or a ring range. Again, you can choose your units, and then you can choose the distance. So I chose miles, and I went with 50, and it will recenter your map once you choose where you want the rings drawn to show all of the rings. So it's 50-mile radius out. You basically get 3. So that's the proximity tool. And then if you were to want to change map projections, this final button here allows you to do that. Not satellite, but still an imagery related data type that Weather Service is very interested in is the radar. And okay. Just acting a little funny right now. I'm going to change our sites back to the general site. Another thing we have that's a really cool piece of the layer tab is called bookmarks, and this is something NOS developed back during deep water. And so this allows you to say, I want to be able to go see these certain data layers for this area consistently, and so, or be able to send other people to it. So right here we have the different, so Weather Service is made up of 6 regions. So these are regional views based on Weather Service, where the Weather Service regional headquarters areas of responsibility. If I were, say, sitting in the Weather Services National Operations Center and I just wanted to roll through all of the regions, that's what these boxes are for. You can add the numbers in any order you want, but you do have to enter the numbers in normal numerical order, but you can put them in any of the boxes. And then down here where it says play slideshow, you can choose your how many the interval you want it to display for. 10 seconds is the shortest you can choose, and then you hit play slideshow, and the name of the bookmark appears at the top of the map, and then in 10 seconds it will switch to the next view. And then you, when you're done with the slideshow or you want to start interacting with the map again, you just simply click on the map. So there's also something called personal bookmarks that you can have, you get when you're logged in. And anyone that works for NOAA can request an account. You would go to the login tab and then click request account. We have to initially set up your account, and then you will be able to log in with your CAT card. And that allows you to have private bookmarks. So if I was going through the whole normal CAT authentication, so now when I go back to the bookmarks view, it now also has my views as well as the shared views. And that's basically the one benefit you get from having a login account right now, is that you get to have your own private bookmarks. The other thing is when you activate a bookmark, and so I was talking about radar when I jumped over to bookmarks. So this is a bookmark for radar. It will change your layer tab view to tell you what the active view is. And if you have permissions to edit it, you would be able to edit it like I can. And then it reduces your table of contents to the data you have displayed within that radar. And so that's why you also now have the show all layers button to be able to get all of the layers back. I'm not sure why. Oh, there's a little bit of Alaska is displaying, but again, we have the time slider defaulted on. And so, yeah, you can see here, I'll zoom into Alaska. Oh, there's the East Coast. It was just being a little slow to be able to see the radar better. And you can see that it's moving. This is the one that I tend to like to speed it up for, because the radars otherwise will feel like it's not moving at all. But you can see a little bit of movement there. Also, when you're using a tool like the zoom, the drag to zoom tool, if you're done with it, you can click it to turn off. The default, what your mouse does is if you click somewhere, it brings up the attribute table for the data. This is very geeky GIS stuff. So we're working on one of our extended, hopefully later this year, things is to make those tables a little more user-friendly and readable. So I think I had 15 minutes, and I think that takes us to about 15 minutes. So I will open the floor for questions.
All right, thanks, Kari. Yeah, let me just say that if people have questions, they can go ahead and put them in the chat room. And please join us next Thursday when YJ No from CIRA will discuss progress on improvements for cloud layers and 3D cloud data. So without further ado, we've put the link in the chat room. And if you have any feedback, there will be a survey that link that will be posted. There it is. And we'll start to take some questions now. Let's see. Let's take our first question from Steve Zubrick. Can the GLM geostationary lightning mapper data be added as a satellite layer?
So it depends on what format you have it available as.
So yeah, Kari, the GLM data is available both in point data format and as gridded products on the same grid as the ABI, the Advanced Baseline Imager data that you were showing.
So the way that we add the data is based on like what we call GIS formats. So this one was made available as a web mapping service. We can accept any OGC compliant format. So if it's a KMLs are a little harder, but we can work with them and make them work. But WMS, REST end services, WMTS, those are the formats that we add most frequently, but any of them in this list here can be added. And you can also find that list of data types. And I should have talked a little bit about this. And we have a user guide under the help tab. So the help tab has some general screenshots that are helpful for just basic navigation. But this PDF is about a 100-page document that goes through anything and everything about the viewer pretty much.
Okay, so where would one start? Or who would somebody talk to about starting the first steps down that road?
So you can send an email to us. I clicked on the wrong tab. If you go to the information tab, that information block that I canceled out comes up, and the email right here, NWS, I'll paste it into the chat, gets to our team.
Okay, so yeah, Steve's in our Lightning working group. So, Steve, did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
Not at this time, Brian. I mean, there's certainly other things, and maybe I can work with like Lee Byerly on trying to get those available. You know, for example, like the Lightning Cast. And it also depends on if this is a public website versus, you know, private. It looks like anybody who has the link can use this.
So
Yeah, go ahead, Kari.
Yeah, at this point, it is public. We do have the capability we have the capability now, we just haven't done anything with it, to set data to not public. So right here, this tab called privileges. So you can see for this layer, I'm on the global visible imagery. This is the back end. This is only accessible to data managers for the system. And so on means that you can see it, like when we're working to get a data layer to look correct, we have a testing option here that we'll put on, and then we turn it actually on once it looks like we want to. But then we also have this sensitivity notion, so we can limit this to only people that are federal, or we've got a place for it in here, but we could say just NWS staff. We've talked with the Water Center in the future when they're ready to prototype data sets. We plan to have their data sets listed just for select. So basically, we're going to have a water model evaluation privilege, and they will give us the specific list of users that can see the data that way. So we have a lot of future capabilities. We just have to, those kinds of requirements get prioritized through the Weather Services AFS office.
All right, thanks, Kari. Let's take the next question from Mark D. Maria. Can you view the national blend of model products in the viewer?
So not currently. We have a few models have kind of been requested specifically and added in, things like the national blend and the other models. I have hopes longer term, but our direction right now has been to not include the models, largely because of the volume of the data, and this application is on the cloud. So we have to work on ingress and egress cost and data access to be able to do that. MDL is actually working on a development task that would either create a subset of the viewer for the models so that you could even get like the quad charts with the 4 views and 1 screen. So we have development work. It's just not, I have no idea on a timeline for it.
Okay. Next question is from Tae-Young Choi. What are the data sources for the global visible image mosaic layer?
So even everybody can find the data sources. So I turned off manage, which is what allowed me to see the backend stuff. And I'm actually going to log out so you would see what anybody would see. If you right click on any layer, it gives you several options, and you would choose view metadata. And then, so it's NowCoast. This is another NOS application that John Kelly is the program manager for. So they've created the map service that we're ingesting. But then we also have the information and the links back to the source that they're ingesting from, which is the NSDIS.
Yeah, so it talks about goes east, goes west, Meteosat, Himawari, basically the geos that we have access to.
And then this, so external metadata should be an XML file. If we don't have, yeah, so that's what you're seeing here. This is the metadata that I'm sure NowCoast, yeah, generated. And then that's why in the additional information we had the links to the nested sites here in the paragraph, because metadata is not always the easiest human readable thing. So that we call this metadata light. And so that's where this section is where you'll usually be able to find more details about the data. But if you're wanting to add the data into a GIS system of your own, if the place we're getting the data from allows for that, you'll find that here in the URL slot on this metadata window.
All right, thanks, Kari. Next question is from Janet Salazar. Is this viewer only for NWS use and not given to partners?
No, it's a web-based application, so anybody with a internet connection can use it. The logins we are limiting to NOAA employees at this point, but the login, the only thing that, yeah, and we may eventually open that up to partners as well. We're just being a little, as we're still, you can see, experimental. We're hoping to be operational by the end of the fiscal year, so end of September. Those bookmarks that we have down here are exactly what you would have from a bookmark view in your browser. It just allows you to keep it nice and neatly organized and titled within the viewer. So that personal bookmark thing I showed, partners can just bookmark, create a folder in their own browser and bookmark that way, because it's basically just the full link. So each of these numbers in the URL corresponds to one of the data layers that's turned on.
Okay. Joseph Patton asks, we're also working on a public GIS friendly website for GLM gridded products at UMD. So there may be, if it's in a more GIS friendly format, that might help to get it into the viewer.
Yeah.
Okay. Andrew Goner, can you move layers up and down in display order?
So the way to change display, well, there's two things you can do. One is you can right click and you can bring front or bring back. Or if you were wanting something to be on top, you can turn it off and turn it right back on. That will put it on top. But right now there's not a way to move them up and down. The privileged, the data managers can do that within a folder, but not, we can't move from folder to folder. We have a long-term development ticket for that. We're actually working with NOS. They're planning a big user interface overhaul for 2023. And so we probably won't be as tied to the order in here as we are currently. Yeah, I lost my thought. I was going to say one other thing, but yeah.
Okay. Those are all the questions we have right now. So if you do have a question, get it in the chat room. We'll do a little bit of wrapping up here. Let's see, what's next for the viewer, Kari? There was a comment period and it looks like it's in an experimental mode.
Yes, so we did an internal to weather service evaluation in 2021 from April through July. Then from July until January, we did one comment period, came back from that, did a little bit more work, got some feedback, more feedback from weather service. And so then we did an additional comment period in the month of May. That was very successful. We had the other question about partners. We sent that out to our partners to have them evaluate. We sent it out to the partners at the national level, as well as our coordination meteorologist, and had them send it out to people they work with regularly. So we had feedback from most of the people identified as individuals, but some of them were broadcasters, some of them were DoD. So basically, other federal agencies, other state and local agencies that looked through it. We had over 100 responses and 300 individual comments. So we've collated all of that information. We're doing some development work now to address some of the concerns. And then Weather Service has a process called 10102 that governs the experimental to operations process. And so we will be going back out to our expert teams for a vote in July, and then hopes to have experimental, and it'll be removed probably just from this the general site I was using, and the water site. And then once tropical season is over, it will be removed from tropical. And then as the subject matter experts for each of the program teams sign off on the rest of the sites, then we will remove experimental from those. But if you're familiar with Weather Service process, we have the page for public notification statements, and we'll give a 30-day notice before each of those changes happen.
Okay, Kari, I've got a few more questions. This one's from Brian Gockel. He says, Kari today presented some very flexible dynamic display overlay capabilities. AWIPS today is quite limited in these types of capabilities. How do you foresee, or do you have any thoughts about how these capabilities might be brought closer and ultimately fully into NWS operations so that more forecasters could leverage these capabilities routinely for satellite and other data?
So yeah, that's part of the reason we're working with the service program teams, is to make sure that we can get it integrated more into the operational stream in the forecast offices and the river forecast centers. One of the things that one example of that we're working on for the fire site that we have supplemental funding to work on this next year is, well, it's kind of a dual fire and water. So we have a lot of flash flooding that happens in areas that have fire burn scars. And so the forecasters have been doing kind of a laborious process of editing burn parameters and going back and forth. So the ultimate vision is that we'll be able to train people in the forecast offices to make those edits right within the viewer, and then be able to create bookmarks to share that out with partners. So we see it like I showed kind of quickly, the slideshow capability. NOS uses that when they're in an incident command system structure at the command post and situational awareness to just keep map information in front of people. So I see that as being beneficial for the ROCs, the regional operations centers or the National Operations Center. I think my big plan would, I would like to see a lot of what's reviewed at the Weather Services morning stand-up to be able to be displayed through the viewer. So have big dreams and have management support when they see applications coming in. Like we also have a beach forecast page that we're working on, which focuses on rip currents that we're working on getting into the marine site. And so as management is seeing some of these things being developed, they partner those teams with us to incorporate the capabilities into the viewer, so that also as people move around the country, they don't have a one-off at a forecast office. If you go from being a forecaster in Miami to a forecaster in Portland, you would have the same tool to use. And then the same thing more regionally for local emergency managers that may be supported by 2 forecast offices, that they're able to use one tool to access all their information.
All right, thanks, Kari. Just one more question or two. Any plans for adding polar orbiting satellite data like JPSS 1 and 2 is due to launch in the fall?
Yes, and I need to follow up to see why. I know it's on our list of requirements, so it must be that we had a formatting issue, but I know that from a weather service perspective, at least Alaska definitely wants that data in.
Right. Okay. All right, last chance for any additional questions. Going once, going twice. All right, I'll toss it back to Brian Gockel.
All right, thanks very much, Brian, for that facilitation and for your decades of partnership with us on these satellite projects. And thanks also, Kari, for that very informative talk, and also really encouraging to hear that this is not just a temporary demonstration capability, but something that you've got your eye on kind of the long game for integration where possible into operations. So that's pretty exciting. We'll be keeping an eye on this. And thanks for sharing the link. I'm going to test drive it, as I'm sure many others who haven't seen it or test driven it before today will. So great presentation. In closing, wanted to thank both Kari and Brian, as well as you can see on the screen there. And as Brian mentioned earlier, we've got a talk next week lined up. Usual date and time, Thursdays, noon Eastern. YJ No, research scientist from CIRA, is going to discuss the progress and improvements for cloud layers and 3D cloud data. We invite you to that talk. I hope you can attend. And on that note, we'll wrap it up for today. Thank you very much.